Hi there, this is Scott Nicholson. Welcome to session 20 in the Gaming and Libraries course. Today we're going to be focusing on the topic of assessment, which, all right, I just lost half the people. Okay, fine, bye. Now, assessment is something that you should be doing across your library. It should be integrated into all of your library activities, is doing assessment. That'll give you some idea of how well you're doing and some way of justifying if you're doing a good job. So with gaming, it's really important because gaming programs are very likely to struggle with having to justify their existence. Why is it you're doing these things? Now, the first thing I'll talk about is the framework in which the gaming takes place. Now, if you have gone through this video and gone through the processes of how to select your games, you're going to know what your assessment needs to do. Because if you went from library mission to gaming program goals, from the goals, pick your archetypes. From the archetypes, design the program and decided on certain variables and then use that to select the game. Then you can trace that all the way back up to the goals of the gaming program. And that's what you need to think about in your assessment. When you're doing your assessment, you should be assessing to see, did you meet the goals? What happened from the gaming program? What was the result, and did it meet the goals? One of the problems that we have in library program assessment is many times we're focused a lot on, was the patron happy? Are you happy with this? Please choose an answer from 1 to 5, which will most likely be 4. That's actually the way these surveys work out. You ask a question with the answer from 1 to 5, where 5 is positive and the person is most likely to put 4. So we want to try and avoid a bunch of questions on variance of, are you happy? You can have one, and that's what people will expect to be able to tell you, but you want to ask more probing questions to really get at what people felt. Now, there are several parts to the assessment that you need to do. The first part is collecting data about the context. And what this means is you need to be systematic in recording what went on at the gaming program. Not only is this useful for you for record keeping, but this is useful for me as a researcher because I'm going to be asking you that question. Every year I've been doing a large-scale survey of gaming programs and libraries. I'm going to ask you some questions about what went on at the gaming program. So you need to document that because you think you'll remember, but you won't. Once you get past it, you'll be really struggling to remember what you did. And this is true, really, if you do something every month or every couple weeks, you're going to forget what you did. So the first step is document what games you had out. Document where things were that can help you in your planning in the future and what games you had. By collecting this information, it'll help you next month and remember what was going on and help you rotate your collection if that's one of your goals. So document what games are out, document the space, the hours, document the marketing you used to remind you of what were the ways that you reached out with this particular activity. Document any special things that were going on. You know, there was a news crew here, or this was in line with book talk, or this conflicted with a computer activity, or whatever. Document the context of what went on. And you also want to document anything special that happened during the event. Anything that came up that you weren't expecting, you know, that we had parents who interrupted and asked us to be quiet, or something else happened. You want to document that as well. It's really collect data at the point of, do this right after it ends, where you list out. In fact, you may even want to make some notes before you pack it all away, or take some pictures. That can help a lot too. I try and make sure and take some pictures so that you can look and say, oh yeah, we had this and this and this and this, and it's all documented. You also want to document information about your help, to talk about how many volunteers there were, did that work out, were you short or were you okay? Because that's, again, going to help for planning in the future. So that's the first part of an assessment, is you need to assess the context of what actually went on. The second part of your assessment you want to create is an activity log. And so the activity log should have, running down the side, all of the activities that you're going to have available at the gaming program. And you'll have to do this ahead of time. And then I would put 4 columns, number them from 1 to 4. And the idea here is for each column represents a quarter of time. So if you want to think of breaking up your whole game program into 4 quarters, first, so if it's a 2-hour program, this would represent the first half hour, second half hour, third half hour, fourth half hour. And at the end of each quarter, so i.e. after the first half hour, you're going to count how many people are currently at each of the activity places, and you're going to record that number. You'll do the same for each of the 4 quarters. What this is going to give you is some data about who was using what when, and what things were popular. You can sum these across and see what was popular. You can look for patterns to see do people start here and move here. And again, this is data that I'm going to be asking for, because part of what we're putting together at the Game Lab are some standardized forms that you can use for this kind of thing. And so this is something you'll set up ahead of time, and it might look something like this, and you'll just fill in with a brief head count and take a sample of how many people are at each station. Now, when I'm counting like this, I like to count both the active participants and the active spectators. And then I have also one row for food. The idea is that someone is going to be in one of these spaces, either actively involved with the game or actively spectating with the game, at the food, or milling about. And you total that to find out the number of people you had in the room at each of the end of the 4 quadrants. You could split it up into more quadrants if you wanted. You could use more quadrants, but I have found from doing this, I've tried different timing groups, and I find for this particular form of assessment, 4 snapshots is enough to give you a good feel of what the flow was of the gaming program, where people were at what times during the program. And again, this is going to be really useful data in helping you plan times. If you look and you see, well, it always is the hour from 2 to 3 o'clock is very quiet. Well, you may want to move the program then and try and avoid that hour. It's also going to help you see if you look at activities and see, well, we keep putting out Settlers of Catan, but if you look, there's no one ever engaged with it, so perhaps we need some other events. So I do include spectators in the number with players, active spectators, people who are there, are engaged with the game, even if they're not playing it, people who are engaged with that gaming experience at the time. I record them in this box. You can also use this to record the number of volunteers that were available in the room at that point, just to give you an idea of the volunteer to player count. And that's where, if you compare this back to your original notes, where you say our volunteers were swamped or our volunteers didn't have anything to do, then there's some data you can compare back and forth to help you plan into the future. The third part is going to be a patron survey. Now, this will be a survey that you make available to the patrons, either in print or on a brief web survey that people do as they leave. You don't want them to wait until they get home. A lot of people will not fill it out at that point. So I collect some basic demographics. Now, if, again, for your library setting, if there are other demographics you would want to collect, you would ask those questions here. You want to think about what those might be. And then you're going to move into asking about what activities they did. And so I've done this a couple ways. The question that I've asked that's collected a rich data set would be, what were your 3 favorite games you played today? And then circle your favorite one. If you don't want it to be that complex, just ask which was your favorite game you played today. If you have a big enough sample, then just the single game is going to be easy to bubble up. If you have a small number of people coming, finding out 3, circle the best, gives you more data to look at. I also like to establish their own gaming preferences. And so I've done this in a couple different ways. One is I've asked, what are some of your favorite games in general? And that gives you a couple ideas. One, it tells you if this person is more of a board gamer or a video gamer. But 2, it's going to give you some ideas of perhaps games for future programs. You can ask that in more general categories. What kind of games do you play normally? But I find just asking, what are your 3 favorite games? Or what is your favorite game? Again, depending upon the number of people you think are going to be there and how much data you want to work through, can give you useful data to move ahead. Now, you also are going to want to ask questions that reflect upon the goals of the gaming program. If, for example, your goal was to help people engage with each other, then you want to ask a question about that. Something like, did you meet anyone new today here at the library? That'd be a simple way of getting at that question. If your goal is to get people to use other library resources, then you could ask something like, what else did you do while you were here at the library today? And give them some choices. I checked out a book, I used the computers, I talked with my friends, whatever. There's a couple questions that I'd like to ask about repeated gaming programs that can provide some really useful data to us. And the first one is, have you been to a gaming program before? And the second one, the follow-up, is, if so, what did you do at the library between this gaming program and the last one? And you can have an answer like, I didn't come to the library, I checked out some books, I used the computer, some of the basic things that you do within your library. But we really want to capture that particular piece of information. Do people who come to gaming programs come and do other things at the library? You also might want to ask a before and after pair of questions to get at if the gaming program actually changed the way people feel about the library. Something like, before today's gaming program, how did you feel about the library? With answers like, it didn't really have anything for me. It was an okay place to go, but I didn't really like going here. I enjoyed going and visited the library frequently. Some choices like that. And then a second question saying, after the gaming program, how do you feel about the library? Same things. Don't really like coming here. It's an okay place to go. I'll come here for the gaming, but not for anything else. Or I like the library. it's interesting to me. Something like that, a pair of choices so that they can say, you know, did this gaming program make a difference? And that's what you want to get at. Because these questions are really valuable in justifying why you're doing this. If you can show this data and say, look, the gaming program is changing the mindset of people who didn't find the library to be useful, and now they're going to come back here more often, well, that's useful stuff. You can also slip in another pair of questions, one early and one late. And the early one can be up with the demographics, saying, before today, when was the last time you were at the library? And ask them, you know, was it a week? Was it a month? Was it a year? And then at the end, say, when's the next time you plan to come back to the library? In a week, in a month, in a year. And you can compare those two to see, does the gaming program change people's intentions toward the library? So this is the sort of stuff you want to ask. And so this is what I'm talking about, getting at questions about how did the gaming program change their mindset towards the library? How is it changing their behaviors? It's not that important to us, did you have fun today? Yes, of course they had fun today. But really getting at how did it make a difference? Because that's going to indicate if they had fun, if it's making a difference. I do like to have a couple questions, open-ended questions about what sort of games would you like to see us have at the library, and is there anything else about today's program you want to tell us? Just leave some open-ended questions so people can leave comments and feedback. You can choose to collect email addresses on this sort of form. If you wish to know about future events, please give us your email address. If you wish to keep that particular piece of information separate from the survey, that can actually help to not bias what goes on the survey. If you have instead a separate sign-up sheet, perhaps when people come in, they sign up with contact information so you can reach them again, and then when they leave, they get the survey so they can answer those questions. If you visit the website for the class here, you will find some sample tools that we've put together over the years in doing assessments for these programs. Now you need to adjust these because these don't take into account your library's goals, and you need to make sure, in order for this whole argument to make sense of taking the games back to the goals, you need to assess that the games are having an impact on those goals. They're meeting those outcomes that you're presenting. Because if they're not, then you need to make changes and decide if a gaming program is indeed right for you. This weekend, we've got a few more guest speakers talking about their particular interests with games and libraries. And next week was the last few days of class. I'll be talking about how to answer the critics and then summarizing all of this together into a final lecture where I give you things you should look at into the future. So with that, have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday. Bye-bye.